Hey guys, so I'm here. Zidane is here. It'll probably be a broken video because this one is kind of fussy. Anywho, I wanted to share with you guys my labor and delivery story. Just to tell you guys right off the bat, it was kind of a traumatic experience. I did not have a very good labor or delivery. So I'm just going to dive right in, and this might get lengthy, it might get annoying, so if you really don't want to know what time, what happened, just don't watch the video. So on Sunday the 21st, we checked into the hospital about 7:42, and at 7:55 they hooked me up to the monitors to check his heart rate and all that kind of stuff, and if I was having any contractions. And by 8:50, about an hour later, they placed the Cervidil, and I had to lay flat on my back for 2 hours with the Cervidil in while it was starting. And then by 10:50, I got to come off my back, and I was able to move around, and I got to come off the monitors as well. And by this point, I was starting to cramp. I was starting to cramp a little bit, but nothing too serious. And at midnight on the 22nd, so 12 o'clock a.m., they did vitals at midnight and gave me some meds to sleep, or try to sleep. And by 9 o'clock a.m., I was done with my first round of Cervidil, and I was dilated to a 2. And when I went into the hospital, oh, I'm so sorry. When I went into the hospital, I was dilated to a 1, so I dilated 1 centimeter overnight. Alright, so by 11:15, I was 75% thinned and still 2 centimeters, but my waters were low, or kind of bulging. And something weird, I know throughout my whole entire pregnancy I wasn't sick, I didn't get morning sickness, but at 11:30 that day I threw up like 3 times. So I don't know if it was some of the drugs that they were giving me or what, but my record is now broken. And by 12 o'clock, so noon, I was 90% effaced until still 2 centimeters dilated, but my waters were still bulging. Alright, so for the rest of the afternoon, I was left to just kind of dilate and progressed on my own. By 3 o'clock, I had an IV put in because things were progressing and they didn't know when they'd get the chance to do it again. By 6:15, my doctor really wanted my waters to have broken naturally by then, but they didn't. And for whatever reason, a whole lot of members of their team were at the hospital at that time. So if there were any complications that were to arise, my doctor wanted to break my waters while everyone was there. So she started out with a really tiny needle and broke just a bunch of tiny little holes, and that did work, except it just kind of maintained being tiny little holes. It didn't really do anything. So she then used the actual hook and broke my waters, and because the polyhydramnios, whatever, this was quite the event. I soaked her, I soaked the bed, yeah, It was pretty gross. And so that happened, and it was a very interesting experience. There was a risk of a cord prolapse, but that did not happen. And the reason she wanted to break them while I was still only dilated a couple centimeters was because if I went any more and I was open more, there would be a bigger chance of a cord prolapse. So that's why that happened. And by 9:10, they wanted to start Pitocin. I was having contractions, regular contractions by then. However, they were a little too far apart. So they gave me the Pitocin to get them a little bit closer together, and it worked, and it was intense. And by this point, I still didn't have an epidural, but by 10 o'clock, I had asked for an epidural, and this is where things get fishy and why my labor and delivery was so traumatic. The first epidural, it went in well, and everything seemed to be working. And then they're like, "Oh, are your legs kind of heavy yet? Is anything kind of going on?" And I was like, nope. So they gave it a few more minutes. They gave it a half an hour total. And I had a failed epidural. It did not work. And that half an hour was excruciating. It was painful. I was miserable. I was crying. There were no tears, but I was crying. It was weird. And so by 10:30-ish, the anesthesiologist came back and did it again. And the second time, it seemed to work. Everything kind of went numb. I went through some of my strongest contractions and didn't feel them. And then it stopped working. I don't know exactly what time it stopped working because it was just a crazy situation. But it did stop working throughout the night, which was really, really crazy. So at 11 o'clock, they put a catheter in. Yay. And by 11:55, I was 8 centimeters. Woo! And the 23rd. So between 1 o'clock and 1:15, sometime in there, they checked me, and I was 10 centimeters. And it was 10 centimeters. His head was low but not engaged. So for a little while there, they made me not push with contractions to try to naturally get him to come down. But that did not really work. And from 1:30-ish to 4:30-ish, I was pushing. Well, the epidural wore off, and all that kind of nasty fun business, and made no progress whatsoever. And the scary part is, they had a monitor inside that they could track how strong I was pushing and everything. And I was pushing some of the hardest they had ever really seen, but it wasn't doing anything. And throughout this time, they did pull in an ultrasound machine just to see, try to see where he was located. And for a while there, he was sideways, so he was facing the side. And then they couldn't tell. They thought he had moved and whatever. These 4 hours or so, some of it was okay. Like when my epidural was working, it was going, I was pushing really, 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 really strong. And then by the time 4:30 ran around, the epidural wasn't really working. I think there was something working, there was some kind of something. But by the time 4:30 hit, I was exhausted. I was almost falling asleep, even though I was in so much pain. And yeah, so in this point, there was no progression. His head was stuck. He was stuck. Unfortunately enough, it just wasn't happening. And throughout all the pushing and everything, he stayed really good. His his heart rate and everything was awesome. So by the end of that, I gave in to a C-section. I was devastated. I'm almost crying just thinking about it, because that is not how I wanted it to go. I wanted to try everything I possibly could, but he was stuck at the top. He wasn't just, stuck halfway down. He wasn't coming out. So that was by 4:30 that I gave the official decision, and from 4:30 to 6:10, I was still having contractions, full-fledged contractions. I still had the urge to push. I was still in so much pain, it wasn't even funny. And it took 2 hours to get the C-section going because of getting everybody together and whatever. So about 5:30, 5:45, I had people started coming in and talking to me and had to sign my life away and whatever else. But by 6:10, I went back by myself to the OR for prep, and by 6:45-ish, Jordan was allowed to come back there. That was like the longest half an hour, because I was sitting there alone in this freaky operating room where everyone ran around me and got everything ready. But the anesthesiologist that was in the OR during my C-section he was totally awesome. He just kept talking to me, asking how I was doing, and the spinal block was amazing. I almost passed out flat asleep because I was so exhausted by the time 6 a.m. rolled around. And I got the chills from the C-section, so the anesthesiologist, there was like a air blower thing with warm air, and he hooked that up so I was getting warm air on my arms and stuff. It was just really nice. Anyway, 6:45, Jordan came in, and it was kind of weird seeing him in all the scrubs and everything. It was just really surreal. And by 6:53 a.m., Zidane arrived. He came out pink, he was screaming, and was too dang cute for words. I'll be honest, it was really bittersweet when he was born. I was so exhausted, so tired, so upset because I had to have the C-section that I was just kind of numb. I wanted to cry. I wanted to be so ecstatic when he was born, but I really honestly I wasn't. I was in my heart, but I wasn't able to show anything. And then after he was born, he came out screaming. He came out pink, which was good. And then they took him over to the warmer and cleaned him off a little bit. And obviously Jordan didn't get to cut his cord, but Jordan did get to trim the cord when they brought him over to the warmer, which was good. It was awesome. And he was screaming while he was over there, and they wrapped him up and brought him over to see us, and or well, see me, because Jordan was over there trimming the cord. And it was just too cute, and I was so excited. He had chubby cheeks, and he was still screaming at that point. But I was able to kiss him and kiss him and see him, and he was beautiful, and he was here. So he was born at 6:53 a.m. After I got to kiss him and kind of give him a little hug, they brought him to the nursery in the OB department. They did have to clear his nose and everything because there was a little bit of fluid, but nothing. He was breathing just fine. And they weighed him and they cleaned him up a little more. And then let's see, I think by 7:30 I was in, I was fully stitched up again. I was in recovery, and Jordan got to bring him back after they weighed him and all that kind of fun stuff. So official stats, he was born at 6:53 a.m. on December 23rd, and he weighed 7 pounds and 13 ounces, and he was 19 inches long. His head was 14.5 inches, and his shoulders were 13.5 inches. So, not a big baby like they had told me he was. He was a pretty normal, average, kind of small baby, actually. He did have a big head, that was right, but not a crazy, huge baby like I was told that he was. So, that's pretty much the brunt of my labor and delivery. It did not go the way I wanted, and it was really traumatic. It took me quite a while to come to terms with that. And that whole day between pushing and delivery, and then that whole next day, I was up for 38 or 39 hours straight. It was not really a fun time. I was so exhausted, and we had visitors, and I looked dead, to be honest. It was just not good. But by 8:15, I was moved back to my labor and delivery room. And by 8:30, between 8:30 and 9 o'clock was the first attempt at nursing. It went how the first attempt probably always really goes. It didn't really do much of anything. Well, that's pretty much my whole labor and delivery. I hope I covered everything. I hope I talked about everything clearly enough. If you have any questions about any of it, please feel free to ask, as always, or if you need any clarification on why something happened the way it happened, just let me know and I'll try to answer the best that I can. But in the end, it was just how Zidane decided to enter the world, and so that is the way that it was gonna be. So, as always, thanks for watching. Bye.